Live from Quito, Ecuador, I'm Sonia Gray and this is From the South, the daily news brief from Telesur English, and we start this new edition right now. We begin in Chile, where Pope Francis is wrapping up his visit with an open-air mass on the beach in Iquique in the north of the country. The Pope's homily at the mass for tens of thousands of pilgrims focused on immigration. Iquique has seen a large influx of undocumented migrants from Chile's poorer neighborhoods, helping to drive an economic boom.
Let us be attentive to the lack of steady employment, which destroys lives and homes. Let us be attentive to those who profit from the irregular status of many immigrants, who don't know the language or who don't have their papers in order. Let us be attentive to the lack of shelter, land, and employment experienced by so many families.
On Wednesday, Pope Francis had a meal with representatives of Mapuche indigenous people at the end of his visit to the southern Araucanía region of Chile. At the meeting, there were 8 representatives of the Mapuche community, a victim of rural violence in the region, and a Haitian immigrant. The lunch was held at the house of Mother Santa Cruz, a few kilometers from Iquique Air Force, where Francisco held a mass earlier in the day. After that mass, Mapuche activist Machi Lincolnau tried to give Pope Francis a letter as he passed by in his Pope-mobile, but was stopped by security forces. Lincolnau said the letter was a plea to the Pope to help the Mapuche who are being incarcerated. Lincolnau was acquitted twice in a double murder case. However, the Judicial Court of Temuco decided to reopen the case and has put her under house arrest. The mass which Pope Francis celebrated was held at the Makewe Air Base. The location is symbolic because this was the site of the detention center under General Augusto Pinochet's military dictatorship. This was also the land that was taken from the Mapuche in the 20th century. The Chilean government has recognized that this is their rightful ancestral property, but has not returned the land to the people. The community used this opportunity to voice their dissatisfaction.
Our families and spiritual leaders were disappeared, and some of them had to leave their lands behind. What does it mean to us that the Pope apologizes? That doesn't return our territories back to us. The dignity of our people will not return to us either.
The Pope travels to Peru later on Thursday, where his agenda also includes meeting with a number of indigenous representatives. Ahead of his arrival, spiritual leaders from indigenous communities across Peru held a traditional ceremony on a beach in Lima to bring good luck for his visit. They called on Pachamama, or Mother Earth, to protect Pope Francis. One of them said he was sure the visit would bring good news. The Peruvian Catholic Church has been led by Opus Dei and other conservative forces for decades. With the visit of a more progressive pope, some believers hope the church will begin to confront topics that have been taboo.
Days before Pope Francis arrived in Lima, the Vatican intervened in the solemnization, dismissing its director because of the crisis caused by sexual abuses committed by its founder, Luis Figari. The local church declined to comment to the press.
Cardinal Tobin, who was in charge, now is being led by a Colombian bishop who is a commissioner, would be the technical word. But I come back to the Pope-mobile. I come back to the Pope's visit. This is a before and after.
A before and an after. The Peruvian church, that has been led by Opus Dei bishops for 3 decades, faces one of its worst crises because of the cases of pedophilia, but it is still protected by the Vatican. However, Pope Francis has distanced himself from the internal power core and takes a position which, for many, it is the beginning of a change in the Catholic Church.
Pope Francis has also talked about the LGBT community, which he doesn't condemn and says therefore the Church shouldn't as well. This is an important statement, and also the topic of abortion, which the Pope has pointed out cannot be so inflexible and hard with women who have had abortions. But without going against John Paul II's gospel of life, nor the Roman Catholic ordinances in any of these themes.
Even the most conservative in the region support the Pope's position.
What do you think of Pope Francis? Do you think his speech is more open-minded than the Peruvian Church?
Of course, it's a total innovation.
Pope Francis is Jesuit and has a much more inclusive speech, I would say, and he is open to different views. The Peruvian Catholic Church might be more conservative with a more classic doctrine.
On his next visit, Pope Francis is expected to refer to topics as the environment's protection, gender equality, respect for the LGBTI community, among other controversial topics for the Peruvian Church.
And our correspondent in Peru, Aldo Rodriguez, has more on the Pope's visits.
Today around 6 in the afternoon, Pope Francis will arrive to Peru, where he is set to visit two important regions of the country, La Libertad and Puerto Maldonado, where we are right now. More than 100 people from indigenous communities have arrived here to have a private meeting with the pontiff to ask him to defend their fight to protect their territories. The Pope will also visit La Libertad, especially the neighborhood that were flooded by El Niño and that affected more than 3,000 families who lost their homes but haven't received any help from the government yet. He will also visit Lima, Peru's capital, to celebrate a Mass on Sunday before concluding his visit to the country.
We thank Aldo Rodriguez for that report. Demonstrators have taken to the streets again in Brazil's biggest city to protest against increases in public transport fares. The protesters, mostly students, marched through the center of Sao Paulo. They said the increase to over $1 for a bus fare is prohibitive and called for free transport. At nightfall, some groups of demonstrators blocked roads with garbage and scuffled with police. Several arrests were reported.
We are here today not just against the price increase, but also against the new bureaucracy, which makes easy access to the center of Sao Paulo so difficult and so expensive, especially for us as students.
The United States has banned citizens from Belize, Haiti, and Samoa from applying for temporary work visas. These are visas given out to seasonal, low-skilled workers. The move comes just days after President Donald Trump questioned why the U.S. had to take in immigrants from shithole countries. That remark sparked protests internationally and at home, with members of the Haitian community demonstrating outside Trump's resort in Florida. The U.S. says the decision was based on the high rate of overstaying among Haitians, concerns over human trafficking from Brazil, and Samoa's reluctance to accept nationals who have been ordered to leave the U.S. And we'll be back very soon, so stay with us. Workers in Argentina have protested against recent layoff by marching to the Ministry of Defense. Hundreds of workers from a military manufacturing plant in the city of Azul are demanding the reopening of the facility.
Buenos Aires province. This, according to the head of the State Intervention Council.
They have treated us in a way that is difficult to understand. We feel humiliated by this government that promised us a change, that promised an improvement, that said it would vindicate the rights of the workers, and instead of its party being called Cambiemos or Let's Change, it should be called Let's Cut.
This comes despite the fact that days ago, councilmen and workers joined a crisis committee to evaluate the possible options to avoid layoffs. But once again, the Macri administration chose austerity.
This is not only about the loss of jobs, but the delivery of our national sovereignty, because it is one of the only plants with a high production capacity and with international quality certifications. This is a political decision to close the doors of Anazul and to buy from the US or Israel the same products that we can produce.
They haven't received any response from the Defense Ministry, but the workers have vowed to continue fighting to recover their jobs. They are organizing several marches, which are joined by unions and political and social movements.
It's a wake-up call, and I think it's important to highlight that the government is asking the capitalist class to act different. But what authority can the state have against a private company asking not to lay off workers when it applies the austerity policy?
It's a serious situation, and that's why we are here. Because we believe that we need a national unified fight plan to stop this government's attack against the workers.
There are now 300 layoffs in the FANASUL conflict alone. This policy will continue as part of the ministry's reform law that aims to reduce 20% of public jobs in Argentina.
We apologize for that temporary technical issue, but that was the report on the Argentinian protesters to the Ministry of Defense. So we now go to our correspondent, Sabrina Ruff, who has more on those labor disputes from Buenos Aires.
The government of Mauricio Macri continues with its official labor cuts. At first, the labor reform was scheduled to be discussed in Congress before the former president Cristina Fernández de Kirchner was sworn in as a senator, but it was postponed. The image of the president has protesters on the streets. From the workers' unions. Last week, Macri eliminated 16 laws and modified 140, benefiting no other than the companies that don't abide by the labor laws. He reduced their fines and the time that they stay on an offenders list that forbids them from accessing credits or subsidies. Yesterday, he signed a decree to modify the education financing system, a key legislation to eliminate the minimum wage for teachers, and several unions have denounced it, since it also affects union freedoms, and rejected the attack by Macri to organizations that defend workers.
Several Argentine and French organizations protested in Paris on Wednesday against the detention of indigenous leader Milagros Sala and to condemn the policies of Mauricio Macri in Argentina. Some French political parties and organizations have condemned human rights violations in Argentina, like the assassinations of Santiago Maldonado and Rafael Nahuel. They have also denounced the criminalization of social protests.
Milagros Sala has been imprisoned for 2 years by the government of Gerardo Morales of the province of Jujuy under charges that have not been proven. We thought that we had overcome the detained, the disappeared, but the case of Milagros Sala is abominable.
Thousands of people have marched in Chiapas to demand justice over the femicide of Castellanos Belcazar at the weekend. The 24-year-old was found dead inside a well close to the place where she was last seen on Friday night. The demonstration started at the youth park. They want those responsible to be punished. And 32 bodies have been found in 3 mass graves in the municipality of Jalisco on the Mexican Pacific coast. Another 9 bodies were found last Saturday. Authorities say more could be found in coming days as the search for more graves continues. According to the National Registry of Missing Persons, 143 people have disappeared in Nayarit. 114 of them went missing in 2017. The Honduran opposition party has announced the start of a 7-day national strike from this Saturday. It is part of the protest against electoral fraud allegedly orchestrated by President Juan Orlando Hernandez.
The Opposition Alliance announced that starting on January 20th, protesters will start closing down roads and pressuring neighborhoods and communities to join the fight.
We have called for peaceful demonstrations, but we also recognize that civil insurrection is the people's constitutional right in order to restore elections that are democratic, just, and free.
These types of measures will only grow more frequent as inauguration day on January 27th approaches.
First, on January 20th at 6 a.m., we will mobilize on all public roads where we must resist at all times. Then, on January 21st, we will mobilize in Tegucigalpa towards Congress along the Alianza representatives.
Opposition leaders have also said they will only accept to join talks if a prestigious international mediator is present, and this would need to happen before the 27th.
It could be a man or a woman, a former president, someone who has earned international merits. Just like a mediator was chosen during the war with El Salvador. It could even be 2 or 3 people.
Leaders have also talked about a new constituent national assembly, different from the assembly some sectors in support of the current government want to create.
Every time there's a rupture in the rule of law, this needs to be rebuilt through a national dialogue, which in turn is a constituent national assembly. There's been horrible manipulation going on in Honduras regarding this topic. We want a proper assembly, unlike our rivals.
In the opposition's announcement, they also asked the armed forces to stop using violence against the people so that there aren't more deaths during this fight.
The leader of Colombia's Revolutionary Alternative Forces of the Commons, or FARC, plans to run in next year's presidential elections. Rodrigo Londoño, better known as Timonchenko, says he's committed to bringing peace, but observers warn it would be challenging for the FARC to transform from a guerrilla group into a political party. Meanwhile, the electoral process is underway in Colombia, with security being the key issue for voters.
Colombia's electoral machine has been put in motion. Over the past few hours, the National Registry confirmed which candidates collected enough signatures to be eligible for the upcoming presidential elections. Out of 11 hopefuls, 3 were deemed ineligible.
We now have presidential candidates, those who registered political parties and those who collected signatures. Only 3 candidates did not collect enough signatures. Nevertheless, we've got a wide spectrum of candidates.
Moreover, political coalitions are taking shape. On Tuesday, presidential hopefuls Gustavo Petro, Clara López, and Carlos Caicedo declare they will organize a referendum to determine who will be the candidate of their leftist coalition.
The coalition we introduced yesterday is closely attached to the peace accord, but it also believes in a new economic model that goes beyond our extractivist doctrines over oil, coal, and gas. We want to pose a profound democratic reform for Colombia.
Meanwhile, all over the country, the road to congressional elections is being smoothed over. Yet, many people still face uncertainty and political violence. Over the past few days, pamphlets have been circulating which threaten alternative candidates, in particular those from FARC and social leaders.
The question is, which is the democracy we want? We need to guarantee the voice and participation of sectors that have yet to receive those guarantees which other sectors have traditionally enjoyed.
On Tuesday, 2 former FARC combatants were murdered in Antioquia. The newly formed political party claimed the murders happened hours after the victims held a meeting with community to boost their campaigns in the region.
A country that's moving forward under a peace accord cannot afford to build its democracy over the graves of the opposition and of those who decided to join the side of lawfulness and democracy.
Inevitably, peace will be at the center of the upcoming elections, but this time the question will be, what kind of democracy does Colombia want? A far-reaching one that protects the lives of those with critical or dissident thinking, or one that's based on political violence?
The 10th CARIFORUM Crime and Security Cooperation Program has been launched in Barbados. As CARICOM Secretary General Owen LaRocque explains, the region is plagued by a drug and arms problem that did not originate within their shores. He says the program will address that by fusing community outreach with a heightened national security effort. allowing the Caribbean to attack the scourge from all sides.
Beyond the toll taken on people and society, crime and violence have become very costly to the region's economy and have an adverse effect on foreign investment and tourism. More than ever, we need to remain united in our efforts to fight crime in all its dimensions. The onus is on us to provide a secure community for all our people.
Venezuela's opposition have announced they will not be attending talks with the government in the Dominican Republic, which was scheduled to restart in the next few hours. The fourth round of talks ended last Friday with progress on most of the six-point agenda, but the opposition now say they want clarification of a shootout on Monday in which a former police pilot and several of his armed group, along with 2 policemen, were killed. We will bring you more as we get it. The highlands of Bolivia are one of the regions with the highest amount of sunlight on the planet. That's why the Bolivian government is promoting the development of solar energy to generate electricity. Our correspondent in Bolivia has the story.
The spectacular Salar de Uyuni, the world's largest salt flat, is located in the highlands of Potosí at 3,600 meters above sea level. Close to one of its edges, there's a solar energy plant being built.
We have the most radiation in the world in the Bolivian highlands, and especially in this region. It has been a strategic decision to build a photovoltaic plant here.
This is the third and largest plant being built in the country with state funds that will generate electricity based on solar energy.
The first solar plant has a capacity of 5 megawatts, and it's located in Pando department, very close to the Cobija community. The second plant we built in Tarija, close to the Yunchara population, also with a capacity of 5 megawatts, very similar to the one in Cobija. And this one is the first on this scale that we will have in Bolivia.
Making an inspection of the site, President Evo Morales said the main objective of this type of state investment is to protect the environment and reduce energy production from fossil fuels.
Esa planta tiene un costo de $62 millones.
This plant has a cost of $62 million and will generate 60 megawatts. The Department of Potosí at peak times and peak days has a demand of 120 megawatts, which means we will produce almost 50% of the local demand.
De la demanda interna del departamento de Potosí.
The plant is being built on a site covering 105 hectares, 94 of which are occupied by almost 200,000 solar panels.
Cuando llegamos al gobierno 2005-2006, la demanda interna del...
When our government began in 2005 and 2006, the domestic demand for all Bolivia was 700 megawatts, and last year we reached 1,500 megawatts. In those early days, generation and consumption were balanced, but now we have a surplus of 500 megawatts.
Pero ahora tenemos por lo menos unos 500 megavatios de reserva.
The current administration is promoting electricity generation with an emphasis on the use of environmentally friendly sources such as wind, solar, and geothermal energy. Its aim is to make Bolivia a provider of clean electricity to the continent.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Authorities made a massive drug bust in Portugal and Spain on Wednesday, seizing hundreds of kilograms of cocaine hidden inside fresh pineapples. Police also arrested 9 members of the gang that transported the drugs from South America to Europe in shipping containers. On top of 745 kilos of cocaine, police also dismantled a laboratory where the drug was cut with additives. The Iberian Peninsula is a major entry point for drugs coming from both South America and Africa. And now let's have a look at some of the other stories making headlines from around the world.
Dubai's Emirates airline has announced a deal for up to 36 Airbus A380 aircraft. The deal is worth $16 billion, marking a critical win for the European aircraft manufacturer. Airbus had said earlier that the A380 survival lay with this deal, otherwise it will have no choice but to close production. Chances of a US government shutdown has grown as Republicans have concluded that they would be unable to pass a long-term spending bill by the Friday deadline. A bipartisan deal on immigration that would shield some 700,000 people from deportation lays in tatters. This comes after President Trump's reported use of vulgar language during a tense White House meeting last week, which set off clashes with key Democrats. Britain has agreed to pay France $60 million to continue policing the border at Calais and other border points. The money will be spent on fencing, CCTV, and infrared detection technology. The announcement comes as French President Emmanuel Macron visits the UK for a summit with British Prime Minister Theresa May. Residents of the Pakistani city of Kasur have been terrified by the rape and murders of a dozen children in the last 2 years by a suspected serial killer. The killing of 6-year-old Zainab Fatima became the tipping point last week when her body was found on a rubbish heap near her home. The district hospital doctor revealed that a majority of the victims suffered a similar assault pattern.
I would say 70, 80%, even 90% of these cases, they do tend to have the same kind of injuries inflicted to them. Strangulations, having burn marks, scarring, and wrist cuts, and definitely a type of total physical abuse has to be there.
Suspected Boko Haram suicide bombers killed 12 people and injured 48 others in an attack on the Nigerian city of Maiduguri on Wednesday. In recent weeks, Nigeria's military has embarked on an offensive against the Islamist rebel group in the state of Borno.
A group of divers in Mexico have discovered what could be the world's longest underwater cave. After months of exploring underwater tunnels, they found that 2 caverns connected to form a 347-kilometer-long channel. The cave system was found near the beach resort of Tulum. It will be called Sat Aktun, taking the name of the longest channel in the underwater network. Archaeologists say the find will help understand the development of the region and the Mayan civilization.
It gives us enormous and wonderful perspective in understanding the leaders of ancient settlements, how they could develop. It allows us to understand more clearly rituals, pilgrimage sites, and finally, the great pre-Hispanic settlements that we know of which run along this system.
To Australia now, where a drone has rescued 2 teenage swimmers stuck in rough seas. It is believed to be the world's first drone rescue in the ocean. In the dramatic aerial footage from Lennox Head in New South Wales, the drone is seen dropping a flotation device to the distressed boys. They were then able to cling to the rescue pod and swim to shore. A member of the public had reported seeing the boys and alerted the lifeguards. The rescue took just 70 seconds. And with that, we've come to the end of this daily news brief. For these and many other stories, you can find them on our website, telesyourtv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Tell Us Your English, I'm Sonia Gray. Thank you so much for watching.
Events told by their main figures